famine in the land speaks of economic misfortune upon the earth. It speaks of economic depression. This particular famine was quite severe. In Elijah's day, the famine was 3.5 years. In Elisha's day, who was a spiritual son of Elisha, the famine was 7 years long. Okay, Elisha experienced double portion of everything that his spiritual father experienced, both the good and the bad. So there was this severe famine in the land. And then it says, as soon as the prophets were sitting before him, he said to his servant, put on the large pot and boil stew for the sons of the prophets. Please note the reference to sons of the prophets. The context here is one of fathering and sonship. Elisha is the representative spiritual father, represent of God the Father to 100 spiritual sons called sons of the prophets. And then one went out into the field to gather herbs. So Elisha the father said, put a large pot and make some stew. One of these sons went out into the field without being instructed by Elisha, and he gathered herbs, and he found a wild vine and gathered from it in his lap full of wild gourds, and came and sliced them and threw it into the pot of stew, for they did not know what they were. So they poured it out for the men to eat. And as the men were eating the stew, they cried out and said, O man of God, there is death in the pot. And they were unable to eat. Now, just stop for a moment here. One of the sons went out without being told by Elisha to gather some herbs. And he gathered wild gourds from a wild vine. This was part of the cucumber range of plants. And not knowing what they were, sliced them and threw them into the pot of stew being prepared for the 100 sons of the prophets. Symbolically, the pot of stew being prepared for the sons of the prophet speaks to the doctrine of Elijah. Apostolic spiritual fathers impart grace to their sons by preaching doctrine. This was represented in the large pot of stew that Elisha commanded to be prepared for the sons of the prophets. One son went into a wild bush domain to gather untested produce, which was poisonous, not to his knowledge. And he came and he put that into the stew. He mixed it with the doctrine of his spiritual father. He took untested, untried truth, and he mixed it and he blended it with the purity of doctrine provided by Elisha. And when they were about to eat this, they dished this out for all of the sons of the prophets. And one of them shouted out, there is death in the stew, there is death in the pot, and they were unable to eat this. I want to challenge all of us. We must hold dear to authentic, tried and tested apostolic doctrine communicated to you by credible, holy apostles and prophets. And do not venture out to contaminate your pot with untested truth that you seek to blend in with the milieu of doctrinal belief communicated to you by your spiritual father. This is mixture. This is a Samaritan principle that will ultimately bring death to destiny. Now, how does Elisha correct this? Notice carefully verse 41. Elisha said, bring meal, bring flour. Now, flour is used to make bread. Bread is symbolic of doctrine. So in essence, this meal is symbolic of the doctrine, the apostolic doctrine of Elisha. And Elisha threw it into the pot. And Elisha said, pour it out for the people that they might eat. And there was no harm in the pot. The meal from Elisha arrested the poison in the pot. Right? The doctrine of your spiritual father will arrest every possible contamination that you receive by your unwise exposure to a range of doctrines that might be spurious, that might bring poison to your spiritual system. It is always wise to hold on to the doctrine that your spiritual father brings to you. Paul encouraged his son Timothy in the Lord to do exactly this, to hold on to the things I have taught you and to teach no other doctrine. We have to preserve the purity and the integrity of what we receive from authentic apostolic sources. Indeed, the first fruit teaching is a restoration of a key apostolic principle. And I want to encourage anyone listening, do not allow external sources that are wild vines, unsubmitted to the context of a household of faith, unsubmitted to the context of apostolic doctrine within a safe environment of father and son that communicates accurate doctrine. Do not allow that external context to soil your mind in reference to these things. Elisha throws the meal in, and the poison in the pot is arrested, and they are ready to eat.